So we're pretty late on this, but we are going to talk about the Democratic National Convention. We just happened to be recording our last episode like the day of the final night. So we're finally going to get into it. A lot to go over. I think Kamala Harris's speech is going to be the main thing. But first of all, what did you think of the whole event? Are there any major, what would you list out as your major strengths, the big hits?
Yeah.
Any big weaknesses that stand out to you?
I think the Democrats put on a really, really good performance and painted a very joyous vision of what they're trying to accomplish. And the word joy has been going around, so I'm not new to that phrase. But a really good example is the roll call vote. So the roll call vote is the most boring thing where the states come up and they read off who they're voting for, and historically it's not a big deal because everyone already knows how everyone's going to vote. If you go back to the RNC, Mike Johnson is everybody please keep an orderly fashion and do not cheer when you read the roll call so the tabulator can hear. And it's and then you go over to the Democratic convention and they have state songs for each individual state, and there's dancing and there's celebrities, Little John for Georgia, coming out and singing, and it just paints a very different campaign vibe between what's going on the Democrat side and the Republican side that I think was really effective. Really effective. It paints a really interesting split screen.
It definitely makes sense because they've been, I remember most the first stump speech that Waltz did after being chosen as the VP. And the first thing he said is, thank you for bringing back the joy.
Yeah.
So they're definitely, it's a huge shift too, I think, from Biden, right? Who was we're in grave danger.
That's so
you
true.
You have to vote for me. Versus let's fucking party and
win
this thing.
This is a battle of the soul of the nation. And then Kamala Harris is everyone's favorite aunt. And there's dancing and brat and all this. And it's just a different type of vibe now.
Yeah.
What did you think about the amount of celebrities that they had there?
Not really impactful.
Yeah.
I'm just neutral on it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it does, honestly, I think it does a little bit of damage.
Okay.
With how much celebrities are there. I think Oprah was a big hit, right? Oprah has a lot of clout and all that, and that's good. And she has deserved clout. But there's other celebrities that kind of go up there, and I just feel it's a little bit of a. I think somebody who's struggling to pay their bills will just see a bunch of celebrities up on a stage and be this has nothing to do with me or my life. Yeah. And that's what are you? It feels like it's pandering to somebody.
Sure.
And it's why are you even here? I'm worried about how I'm going to buy a home one day. What are we talking about?
So I think that makes sense, and I agree. Contrast that for me with Hulk Hogan being at the RNC.
I thought Hulk Hogan being at the RNC was stupid. I watched it and I was this is ridiculous. I think this is a joke. And I almost felt the same way with a lot of the celebrities.
Okay, because I don't think it's the same vibe.
You don't think
with
so?
Hogan? No, I think Hulk Hogan and Dana White, it's not it doesn't feel blind to the people.
Okay.
I feel the celebrities at the DNC might feel more like that.
Okay.
But Hulk Hogan and Dana White, I feel is very much we see you, we're trying to entertain you and give you a good time.
Okay.
Whereas the DNC celebs are being okay, this feels like a bunch of rich donors trying to flex their clout on me.
Yeah, that's kind of true. The Hulk Hogan appearance did not have the same vibe as a Democratic big donor Hollywood elite.
Yes.
But one of our biggest problems with the Democratic Party is that they come off as the coastal elite, and it doesn't help you get away from that when you invite a bunch of coastal elites to sing songs and give presentations.
Yeah.
And, I just don't like the celebrities being involved in politics thing. I never really have.
Sure.
But if they're in their own area doing it, that's one thing, but actively being in the political party process, it just seems too much.
I think I get that. The other thing though I want to mitigate is the idea of how much it matters, because I just don't actually think it matters, because most of these celebs were at not primetime spots.
That's very true. That's true.
And Oprah was really the only one who did get a primetime spot, and Oprah was there. She was a good messenger in her own right. Yeah, right? She wasn't just there to flex the clout of the DNC. So I was kind of okay, because these other celebrities that popped up, it's most independents are probably not watching.
That's fair too.
Well, that's happening.
No, that's fair too. They're really only tuning in for the primetime events.
Yeah.
Which the primetime events are Bill Clinton's speech, barely. Biden's speech for sure. Yeah. Obama's speech for sure.
Yeah.
And then Harris's speech.
I wanted to ask, so as we're going through the nights, Michelle Obama's speech.
Yeah.
That got, I would say, the most attention media-wise besides Harris's speech.
Yeah.
What did you think? Do you think it's important that her speech got attention? Is there like a specific message that means anything there? Or is it just like Democrats are pumped to see Michelle Obama? She just seems cool and it's hype.
I think Michelle Obama's speech actually showcases a turning point in the Democratic Party.
Okay.
Michelle Obama used to say, when they go low, we go high.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama now says, when they go low, we go lower, because that speech and Obama's speech against Trump were brutal. They made fun of him. They
True.
made him seem like a small man, which he is. And it was good to see Michelle Obama go on the attack and say that Donald Trump might just be going after one of those black jobs he's talking about. That's a good line.
Yeah.
And I like that Democrats are okay and comfortable with going on the attack and treating Trump for what he is, a loser. And I like that Michelle Obama has finally moved away from that they go low, we go high crap. I always hated that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it also does. We go low, they go low, we go high.
Yes.
Feels elite as
Yes,
well.
it does.
Yeah, condescending.
It does feel, yeah, condescending is the right word there.
Yeah.
Yes, it feels like you're treating the basket of deplorables with kid gloves because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yes.
Right? No, treat them for what they're saying. Right? Go at them.
Sure.
They can take the punches. You know, they want to say it. Have them deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I like that.
They'll probably respect that more.
That's another way of it. Especially the independents.
Yes.
You know, the independents might see weakness from keep going high all the time.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
And also doesn't effectively refute your opponent if you keep going high because you let them get away with stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the Gus Waltz moment? I thought this was great. I loved it personally. Like emotionally, I connected with it.
Yeah.
But I think it also might be helpful for independent voters. I think about how this came up in the CNN interview that Harrison Waltz just did. And Dana Bash asked Waltz about it. And he was like, it was just a great moment to be part of. I'm super proud of my family and my kids. And I'm glad that people can see that this kind of familial love is like part of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And I think that's super effective because the main thrust that JD Vance has been trying to take against the Democrats is they're anti-family, we're pro-family.
Right. And it's very hard to say you're anti-family when your kid is so loving of you that he's crying about how proud he is of you,
Yes.
right? It's kind of hard to say you're anti-family with that.
Yeah.
And I think that was such a touching moment. And I think that speaks, there are a couple themes here that we're going to talk about how Harris actually humanized herself a lot.
Yes.
And that moment humanized Walz a lot.
Totally. It was so genuine. And you were telling me how afterwards, I'm not on Twitter, so I wasn't saying this, that Republicans were like making fun of Gus Waltz.
Yes, there were actually Republicans who were making fun of Gus Waltz because he has like a learning disability, and they were like actually making fun of him.
Absolutely insane, because it was like one of the most wholesome things, pure things I'd ever seen, and it was in a political context, which is like shocking.
Right.
So I was impressed, and I felt that.
Yes. Before we go into the more of the personal stuff and talk about Harris, I want to talk about Biden's speech.
Yes.
There was one line in there that I think was really relevant. High level, Biden gave a really good farewell address to the nation. He talked about his record. He talked about the progress that he led the country on. He talked about the roadmap that he made with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Bill, the CHIPS and Science Act, the American Rescue Plan. He laid out the framework for the next decade of democratic politics and economic growth in the country. Okay. Talked about that. He talked about how he united the world with NATO, going against Russia. Important, vital important. I don't really know if there was another American politician who could have taken the reins in international relations as Biden could. As he said, he knows more international leaders than anybody in the world, and that's probably true. But there was one line that showcases a genuine shift in the Democratic Party, and I think it going back to its New Deal era roots. New Deal era might be too intense, but at least labor-friendly roots. He talked about how in the 80s there was a consensus that when you lower taxes and make business easier to do, everyone does better. And then he says something interesting. He says it wasn't just Republicans thought that. A lot of Democrats thought that too. And in a way, he's kind of talking about himself there.
Yeah.
Because he was a part of that problem. He was a part of the deregulatory era in the 80s.
He was a neoliberal.
He was a neoliberal under the Bill Clinton administration. And what he's basically saying there is he's recognizing that Bill Clinton and Obama did not do the right things.
Yeah.
And they bought into a wrong neoliberal framework.
And him.
And
Biden
him.
did.
And him. He's admitting his own mistakes in that.
Yeah.
And then he talks about how he rectified that, how he's pro-union, how he wants to do pass the pro. And he talks about all this stuff. And I think it's showcasing a real shift in the Democratic Party. And I think him endorsing Harris showcases him caring about the future of where the Democratic Party goes and him not wanting it to turn away from that progress that he put it on.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah, I see that.
It was a really interesting moment.
Yes.
You don't see many times where the party is calling out itself on national stage like that.
Yes.
And he was pointing the finger at himself, and he was like, I was part of the problem back then.
Yeah, and I guess I like for the nerds like us who have kind of tracked the shift of economic theory or ideology across the parties and just also over time, to be able to connect the things that he's saying to those ideas is really
Absolutely.
cool. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Kamala's speech?
Kamala's speech.
So this is, first I would ask you to rate it.
Okay.
And then my question is, and like we'll talk about a bunch of the points, but put yourself into the position of an independent who isn't really tuned in, but watched that whole speech.
Okay.
What are you taking away?
So I'm going to answer both things. First, my rating, an 8. I'll give it an 8. And that's from as a political observer. Okay. As an independent, I think it might be a 9.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris is still a little bit of an unknown. She's the vice president, but vice presidents don't do much. Vice presidents don't have a lot of media coverage. So America doesn't really know her that well. And this is a really great moment for her to introduce herself. And the way that she introduced herself was incredible. She did 2 things that I think are really important. Firstly, she talked about stories of her past that show her personality and her morals. That's huge. Personifying yourself, humanizing yourself. That's vital. But then she also told her story as a thread in the larger quilt that is America's history. She talked about her mom being an immigrant, coming to America for a better life, working really hard, renting an apartment, having to move around a lot. Her family split up. She had to make her way, and beating the odds. And that's something that America is known for. And she was able to tie herself to that American story that I think independents watch and are like, that's inspiring.
Okay.
That's really awesome.
Okay.
The reason I would give it an 8 instead of like a 10 or whatever is because she didn't go too hard on policy. But I don't know if a DNC speech is where you're supposed to go all in on policy. That's not really the point. There's a lot of campaign stops for that. But I thought the speech was really good. What do you think?
I also thought the speech was really good. I would lean towards 9 rather than 8. Weirdly, when I was watching it, I thought about it from the perspective of an independent. I was not as blown away by the first half, which is her doing her personal story.
Okay.
And I have read a lot of opinions that align with you that are like, that was the strength. Like, that was where she really became a person in people's eyes. I guess I've just really shifted into this idea that independents are more analytical. Like, they are actually trying to figure out like what these candidates will do. Because I feel like whenever I read an independent and they'll ask like, what do you think about Trump making these attacks, or what do you think of Kamala saying this? And it's like, I just want to hear what they're going to do. And I don't necessarily trust them. I think vibes are still a big part of it. But I think trying to like wrap your vibe into something that sounds like you're just talking about the way that you'll implement policy as president is the better way to do that. So I really loved her. I feel like the vibe she wrapped into the second half, where she was talking about what she would do, is like, I'm going to regulate big business. Right. I'm going to support unions. I'm going to tax the rich. I'm going to be a really strong international leader of the countries around us. I'm going to support our allies. Really, like, I'm going to follow, like, the way I thought about it, I'm really going to follow in Biden's footsteps. I am fit to carry this mantle. I understand what's at stake, and I can shoulder this burden.
Yeah.
To me, that was what I was really blown away by and impressed by, rather than the weaving together of her personal story, which I will say also was done very well.
Yeah.
For people who do who that's their cup of tea.
And I think one of Kamala's weaknesses is her lack of foreign policy experience, right? That's one of the things that she's she's had a lot of time, dealing with U.S. law as an attorney general and all this stuff, as a senator and all that. But she hasn't really been a foreign policy expert the way like someone like Joe Biden might have been, right? So for her to make such a big point about this foreign policy experience, I think was really important. Again, taking one of her perceived weaknesses and then coming out and giving a really badass speech about it. And then it comes out almost like a strength. She talks about America winning the 21st century in the race for AI against China. And that's such a great thing that I'm glad the president is concerned about and focusing on and thinking about.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And it's a great, that perspective I think is so important, because right now, the bigger part that AI takes in the political conversations, we need to regulate it, right? So to be like, to get some of those centrist pro-business viewers and be like, no, I want to fuel us winning this race instead of just making sure that we stay too safe. Like, obviously, she's going to be for AI regulation, but focusing on that part was a great choice.
Yeah, no, it was a great choice. It was a fantastic choice. I think one of the big personal moments that hit me really hard was when she talked about her friend who was getting molested, and how she said basically, like, my instant response was, pack your bags, you're coming to live with me. That's just like an awesome human moment. I mean, like that speaks volumes to her character, her empathy, that speaks more to your values than anything else anyone could say, right? Because when she was 17 years old and the rubber met the road, she did the right thing without hesitation.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously politics is about what the policies you implement are, but the character of your leadership matters too, and will inform your values and what you're going to fight for. And I think that story makes it very clear who she's fighting for.
I totally agree. It makes you understand the values that are going to fuel those policy positions.
Yes.
And in the speech, what followed right after her telling that story is, that's a big part of why I became a prosecutor. And so, yeah, it's spinning this thing that people can think of her as like big bad prosecutor. Like prosecutor Kamala as a cop was an argument against her in the 2020 primary.
Right.
Instead, this is like, no, this is part of the story of how I'm empathetic and a good person.
And I love the idea that she's always been a representative of the people.
Yeah.
She's always worked for the public, and she's always defended the public. And so when, she says that line of how she walks into every courtroom and the first 5 words she says is Kamala Harris for the people, it's badass, dude. It's just badass. It's just badass.
I agree.
So I think her speech was fantastic, and Trump's got a lot to worry about.